Okay, here we go. August 24th. Tonight we camped. I looked close at Aunt Lizzie. She looks different. She's fat. And then I was happy because I realized there will be a new baby in the family. August 25th. Soon we'll be at Fort Boise, and then instantly we'll be in Oregon. But even after we get to Oregon, we're not to the valley yet. We still have a long way to go. It is very cold at night. And funny, one would think it would ease tempers. It doesn't. Men are beginning to fight. Women are tight lipped. The children whine and cry. Cousin Daniel says, "Hurry on." Or he says, "I will go on without you." I can see he means it. Today Mr. West got really mad. He wanted to stop and rest. Pa had to tell him to grow up. September 1st. Tonight a fight broke out. We were making camp. The oxen had been taken off their yokes. Suddenly Mr. West began whipping the oxen about their heads. He whipped and whipped them. Mrs. West started to scream. Mr. West turned the whip handle around. He was going after Mrs. West with it. Pa ran and grabbed for Mr. West, but Mr. West took the handle and cracked Pa in the head. Suddenly Mrs. West jumped down from the wagon. She had a fry pan in her hand. She bounced it off of Mr. West's head and he dropped right down in the dust. I only wish she had struck him long ago. Ma bandaged up Pa's head. It's cut, but not deep. Pa says it's a good thing we're almost there. Tempers won't last much longer. In the Cascades. Tonight something terrible and wonderful. We are high in the Cascade Mountains. Part way up we had to ford another stream. It was swift and deep. Ma was in the front of our wagon with Becky on her lap. Pa was in the far side of the water. I was in the water on the other side. Suddenly our wagon began to tip. Pa pushed and Ma shouted, "Lean this way." She shoved herself hard against the side of the wagon. I looked up at her. As I looked, Becky tumbled from her lap. She fell into the raging river almost by my feet. Before I could grab her, she was swept downstream. I dove after her. I don't know what I was thinking. Nothing. She disappeared under the water. I dove under too. I was swimming, but I don't know how to swim. Under the water I saw her dress, a bit of white floating. I reached for it. I got it and pulled it to me. It was heavy. She was heavy. I held her to me. I lifted her up and I struggled to shore. People were shouting. I could hear them. Becky's face was white and blue. She didn't make a sound. I shook her hard. I shook her again. "Wake up!" I yelled. She coughed and she spit water and then she began to wail. She howled. I blinked back tears and hugged her tight. People crowded around. Someone took her from me. They handed her to Ma. My baby sister is alive tonight. Ma and Pa just hugged me and hugged me and hugged me. Later, Paul told me I was very brave. I told him I was scared stiff. Pa said that's what courage is all about. Still later, I was sitting alone by the fire. Bobby came and sat beside me. I wondered what she was up to, but I was too tired to care. All I could think of was Becky. After a long while, Bobby said, "You mad at me?" "No." "You should be," she said. "I was a ninny." I looked at her. "I was wrong," she said, "about you being a chicken." "Oh," I said. I could feel myself blushing. I looked down at the embers. "I don't know," I said. "I was scared stiff." "Yeah," she said. I'm scared too. I'm scared too." "Of what?" She waved her hand around. "This. I'm tired and I'm scared. Do you think we'll ever get there?" I nodded. "I think so," I said. "I think we will." Cascades still. Up and over the Cascades. Soon we'll be where we set out to be. Pa did a count. He said about 1 of every 15 people who started have died, and we've lost more oxen and cows and mules than you can shake a stick at. But we're almost there. Home, Pa says. Home? We left our home behind. Mid-September. When we make camp, we're too tired to even talk. People just eat and then bed down. Mrs. Hull is like a mother hen to Mrs. Gibbons. She fusses around. It's like she has adopted all three of them, January, February, and Mrs. Gibbons too. I think Mrs. Hull has a very big heart. Mr. West seems better behaved, but Ma says Mrs. West should sleep with that fry pan by her side from now on. A cold night and raining. Last night when we stopped, we didn't unyoke the oxen. We were sure they'd run away. They're yearning for food and water and rest, so we let them sleep in the yokes. But this morning, two were dead. Dead? But they've come so far with us. Ma promises it will be better when we get to the valley. I wonder how she can be so sure. Next day. I was gathering firewood by the stream when Grandpa came to me. Miss Emmeline was with him. He said, I'm married, Josh boy. Just like that. Reverend Jackson did the honors last night, he said. This here's my bride. I just stared, and then I said, oh, or something else just as brilliant. Miss Emmeline blushed. Tell your ma, he said. Me? I said. Grandpa nodded and grinned. He said, I don't have your kind of courage, son. Later, I told Ma about Grandpa. She pulled her mouth into a tight line. No fool like an old fool, she said. Pa just winked at me. September 27th. I'm so happy to have Charlie and Adam and Bobby walking with me again, and even me too. He's maybe not so bad as he used to be. Things aren't so bad when you have friends. October. We're almost there. Pa says another day, maybe two. The end of the trail. We're so weary. The oxen are more weary. So everyone walks now, even the babies. Aunt Lizzie is getting big with child, but she walks too. Only Mrs. Meany rides and knits and complains. But poor Buster, the pads on his paws refuse to heal, so Bobby and Charlie and Adam and I take turns carrying him. Charlie is nice to Bobby now. I don't know why, but it makes me happy. It's bad when your friends don't like one another. Nighttime. We are over the Cascades. We've come to the valley. We feel the moisture in the air. It's so different from the plains. I think I should be happy. I am happy. We are where we're set out to be, but I'm so tired. Morning. This morning we looked around us. We seem to be on top of the world. The wind blows and the leaves dance. It's so different from St. Joseph. It's green, even now in October. Ma held Becky in her arms. She has hardly put Becky down since the river accident. She pointed out at the valley and said, well, what about that, Mr. McCullough? I think we made it, Mrs. McCullough, Pa answered. Then he turned and reached for me. We made it, Josh, he said. I nodded. We did, I said. Later still. Soon we'll each choose and mark off our square mile of land, but for now we set up tents. We all want to stop living in wagons. Aunt Lizzie and Uncle Arthur put their tent right beside our own. Bobby's family put their tent on the other side. And then it made me mad to see, but the Meanies took a place close by. Old Mrs. Meany is still as mean as she can be. I don't think the mountain air has changed her mood at all. Grandpa set his tent a long way off. The Hulls and the three Gibbons have made a place together. I'm glad they care for one another. And to think I had hated Frederick Hull. So we have a little neighborhood, just like back at the beginning of the trail. The next day, Grandpa came to our tent with Miss Emmeline. Is that what I should call her? I know I can't call her Grandma. Ma is inside sweeping. She turned and saw them in the tent doorway. She quick brushed her hair out of her eyes. She looked at Miss Emmeline. She looked at Pa. No one spoke. And then Oh, I'm so proud of Ma. She went right up to Miss Emmeline. She kissed her on the cheek. Not just one cheek, but two. Later, I can hardly believe this. At supper time, Mrs. Meany hobbled over to Ma. She handed Ma an armful of something blue and fluffy, that thing that she had been knitting the whole journey. Here, she said, real gruff like, a blanket. You're a good enough woman. Then she hobbled away. Ma just stood there. I believe she was stunned. After a minute, she stammered, Thank you. A good enough woman. I hardly know what to make of it. Early morning, October 12th. This morning, Pa picked up a paintbrush and a bucket of tar. He said he'd been thinking about what to write on our wagon. He looked at Ma. Well, he said. Ma said, Go ahead. She said, What? He said. You know, she said. Pa just looked at her a minute, and then, kind of quiet like, he said, Home? Ma nodded. Home, she said. Paul looked at me then, his eyebrows up. I thought for a minute. Home? Was it home? It was strange. I looked around me. There was Becky and Ma and Pa and Grandpa and even Miss Emmeline and Aunt Lizzie and Uncle Arthur and Charlie and Becky and everybody. I smiled. I took a deep breath and nodded. Pa turned back to the wagon and he painted across the back, Home. We are home. I do think those are the best words ever.